40 kilometres south of the small outback town of Yunta, the land opens wide into one of Australia's most unforgiving terrains, the mid-north desert fringe. This is Oak Park Station, a vast sheep property surrounded by hundreds of square kilometres of scrub, dry creeks, and stone ridges. It's a place where silence is constant, broken only by wind, insects, and the sound of stock moving across dry ground. The Lamont family lived here quietly, a family of station workers, parents, grandparents, and children, making their lives in one of the most remote parts of the state. Their youngest, Gus Lamont, was 4 years old. Bright, active, and accustomed to the rhythms of the station, Gus spent most days exploring close to the homestead. According to family accounts later shared with police, he loved being outdoors, playing near the dirt mounds beside the house, a familiar and seemingly safe part of his world. In the outback, distances define everything. The nearest town, Yunta, lies an hour's drive away. Between there and the homestead, no shops, no service stations, no neighbors within sight. Mobile reception fades just kilometers from the main highway. When emergencies occur in these landscapes, help is not minutes away, it's hours. On Saturday, September 27, 2025, the weather was typical for early spring in the region. Mild, breezy, with the sun lowering behind long plains of spinifex. Nothing about the day stood out. For the Lamont family, it began like any other. Station work, routine checks, the comforting predictability of isolation. By late afternoon, Gus was playing outside, within sight of the homestead, under the watch of his grandmother. Reports later confirmed he was wearing a blue Minions t-shirt, gray pants, boots, and a gray hat to block the sun, clothing suitable for a child growing up under the harsh light of South Australia's interior. Well, this was a landscape that tested endurance. The terrain was uneven, the vegetation sparse, and temperatures could drop sharply after sunset. Yet to the family, it was home, familiar and manageable. That sense of normalcy made what happened next almost impossible to imagine. When investigators from South Australia Police first arrived at Oak Park Station, they encountered a setting that demanded precision. Every search effort would have to consider the distances, the lack of landmarks, and the endless repetition of red earth that could conceal any trace. The disappearance of a child in this kind of country was rare, but when it happened, it consumed everything. Before dusk on that ordinary Saturday, the Lamont family's world was intact. By nightfall, it would become the center of one of Australia's most haunting searches. In the emptiness of the outback, how does a 4-year-old vanish without a trace? Before we continue, we'd like to hear from you, out there in the wide silence of the South Australian outback. What do you think happened in those final moments of daylight? Could a 4-year-old really vanish within sight of his own home? Was it the isolation, the environment, or something else entirely that made this place so unforgiving? Share your thoughts below in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. We always read every response. And if you want to follow this investigation as it unfolds, like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter of this ongoing story. At 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, 27 September 2025, the heat had begun to fade across Oak Park Station. Shadows stretched long across the dirt. The family's youngest child, 4-year-old Gus Lamont, was outside the homestead, playing near a mound of sand and earth that bordered the yard. His grandmother, who was caring for him at the time, could see him from a distance. It was the kind of scene repeated every evening, a child at play within sight of home, in the familiar light of the South Australian outback. That moment, confirmed later in police briefings, is the last verified sighting of Gus. According to South Australia Police and national coverage by ABC News and The Guardian, the sighting occurred near 5 o'clock p.m. The grandmother continued her routine inside the house, periodically checking from the window. Nothing appeared unusual. About half an hour later, around 5:30 p.m., she called for him to come inside. There was no answer. The wind carried her voice out across the open ground, but the boy did not respond. She stepped outside, expecting to find him just beyond the door or near the sand mound. Instead, she found the space empty. Within minutes, the search began. The grandmother and other family members combed the yard, the machinery sheds, and the nearby paddocks. They searched beneath vehicles, around troughs, and behind fences. At first, it was quiet and procedural, the kind of quick scan any parent performs when a child hides or wanders off. But when repeated calls brought no sound, the atmosphere shifted. The family expanded the search outward from the homestead, following faint paths in the dirt and circling through low scrub. The terrain around Oak Park Station is deceptive, open, yet disorienting. Even adults can lose perspective within minutes. The ground is hard and scattered with rocks. Footprints fade quickly in the wind when the immediate search yielded nothing. The family used their vehicle to patrol the access tracks, headlights cutting through the dusk. By the time they realized Gus was not within shouting distance or visible range, the light had started to fade. According to police, the emergency call for assistance was placed that evening, roughly 3 hours after the last confirmed sighting. By nightfall, South Australia police were en route to the property, beginning what would become one of the largest coordinated searches in the state's history. At that point, the incident was classified as a missing person case, not yet a criminal investigation. In statements to media days later, police confirmed that there were no signs of struggle, no tracks suggesting abduction, and no immediate physical evidence near the homestead. What happened between 5 and 5:30 remained an unbroken gap, a window of time that has never been filled. The half hour between routine and panic became the pivot on which the entire case turned. In 30 minutes of fading daylight, an ordinary afternoon on a family station became a mystery that still has no ending. The first hour after 5:30 p.m. on September 27, 2025, was filled with motion and disbelief. When Gus Lamont did not respond to his grandmother's calls, the family spread outward from the homestead, following instinct and proximity. They began with the nearby paddocks, sheds, and water tanks, the familiar places a small child might wander to. Each minute stretched longer than the last. The terrain surrounding Oak Park Station offered few visual markers. Low shrubs and broken ground created pockets where a child could disappear from view almost instantly. The family searched in widening circles, calling his name, stopping to listen, then calling again. According to police summaries later provided to the media, their first assumption was that Gus had simply moved just beyond their line of sight. A brief lapse, nothing more. By sunset, that confidence had eroded. The family began using vehicles to cover ground more quickly. They drove the property's boundary tracks, using headlights and torches as the sky darkened. They checked the small creek beds that crossed the property and the disused sheds farther out. The temperature was dropping, and with it came the first real fear that Gus was alone in the cold. At approximately 8:30 p.m., the family placed the emergency call to South Australia Police, SAPOL, reporting their 4-year-old missing. That time aligns with official statements later released by SAPOL and corroborated by reporting from ABC News and The Guardian. Within hours, police units from Yunta and surrounding districts were mobilized. Responding officers arrived late that evening. They began a structured search of the property under portable floodlights and torches. Searchers marked off grid sections near the homestead, checking outbuildings and terrain features one by one. Every movement was documented, standard procedure for missing person operations in remote areas. Throughout the night, the family stayed on site, assisting wherever possible. Police accounts later noted that no items of clothing, no footprints, and no signs of a fall or struggle were located in the immediate area. The ground was hard and dry, offering little evidence to track. By midnight, the situation had shifted from family search to coordinated emergency response. SES volunteers and additional patrol units were briefed to arrive before dawn. The Royal Flying Doctor Service remained on standby in case medical support was required. As the night passed, the property remained illuminated by vehicle beams and handheld lights sweeping through red dust and scrub. There was still hope that the boy had wandered off and could be found by sunrise. The first official statement from SAPOL was issued early the next morning. A missing child alert was circulated statewide, with a description of Gus's clothing and appearance. The case was formally registered as a critical missing person incident. In less than 6 hours, a quiet family station had become the center of a full-scale police operation. When the sun rose over Oak Park Station, hope was still alive, but so was the realization that every passing hour would make the search harder. At first light on Sunday, 28 September 2025, the operation at Oak Park Station expanded rapidly. The case of missing 4-year-old Gus Lamont was now classified by South Australia Police, SAPOL, as a critical emergency search. Command posts were established on site, maps were unrolled, and radio frequencies were secured for coordination. The State Emergency Service, SES, arrived before sunrise, joined by local police, volunteers from Yunta, and later that morning, air support units from Adelaide. The property's vastness, stretching across rough ridges and open plains, required a search measured not in meters but in kilometres. By midday, helicopters equipped with infrared sensors and thermal cameras were scanning the area. From above, crews tracked for heat signatures among the rocks and creek beds, where a small body might appear against the cool ground. Ground teams moved in structured grids, each assigned to defined zones. They marked their progress with colored ribbons and GPS trackers. Officers documented every sign of disturbance, every faint indentation, every scrap of cloth or movement in the scrub. According to official briefings reported by ABC News and The Guardian, the search perimeter soon stretched to over 470 square kilometers. The terrain made the task punishing. Daytime temperatures climbed, the air turned dry and abrasive, and visibility dropped when wind carried the red dust low across the horizon. Within 24 hours, assistance arrived from the Australian Defence Force, ADF. Military personnel provided vehicles, communication systems, and aerial mapping support. Drone units fitted with infrared imaging extended the reach beyond what ground searches could cover. The combination of police, SES, and ADF created one of the largest joint search operations in South Australia in recent memory. Alongside them were Aboriginal trackers from nearby communities, inexperienced in reading the land where ordinary observation failed. They followed faint signs invisible to others, disturbed stones, bent grass, or the outline of small boots in patches of soft soil. Their expertise directed several of the day's focused sweeps, but despite their precision, no confirmed trail was located. As the days progressed, the search routine became relentless. Each dawn brought renewed coordination, hydration protocols, and grid assignments. Each dusk ended with reports showing vast tracts cleared with no trace of the child. Helicopters circled back to refuel in Yunta before returning for night flights, their spotlights tracing lines across the desert floor. By the end of the first full week, searchers had combed homestead surroundings, nearby creek systems, and remote ridges kilometers away. The effort had spanned hundreds of personnel, multiple aircraft, and advanced thermal imaging. Yet, in every recorded search summary released by police, the line remained the same. No evidence of Gus Lamont has been located. The scale of the operation reflected the urgency, but also the growing uncertainty. In the heart of the South Australian outback, hundreds searched the same ground again and again, yet the land gave nothing back. By the third day of the search, investigators were working against both time and terrain. Each hour that passed without a lead increased pressure on the teams at Oak Park Station. Every shape in the dust, every indentation in the soil, carried the hope that it might finally point toward 4-year-old Gus Lamont. One of the first significant moments came when searchers discovered what appeared to be a small boot print near the edge of the property's access track. The print matched the rough size of a child's shoe and was found within the early perimeter zone. For several hours it became the center of attention, photographed, logged, and examined by police technicians. Reports later confirmed that the footprint was analyzed and subsequently ruled out as unrelated to the missing child. According to The Guardian and news.com.au, the soil pattern and tread depth were inconsistent with Gus's known footwear and likely came from a searcher who had passed through earlier. Other possible leads followed a similar pattern. Disturbed soil patches, faint impressions in the sand, and a scrap of fabric caught in a bush all underwent scrutiny. Each item, after examination, was dismissed. The ground itself offered little cooperation. Hard clay, scattered stones, and surfaces repeatedly reshaped by wind. Even fresh footprints could vanish within hours in that environment. Search commanders faced an added challenge in maintaining coordination over such a vast area. Teams marked cleared zones with colored ribbons, but wind often tore them away, erasing evidence of coverage. Drones flying overhead picked up dozens of heat anomalies that, upon inspection, turned out to be animals sheltering beneath shrubs. The desert was full of false positives. Psychologically, the toll on the crews was visible. Many searchers were local volunteers or seasoned officers who had seen similar operations, but the absence of progress weighed heavily. Statements given to Adelaide Now later described long hours of silence broken only by radio check-ins, each one confirming negative result. The emotional fatigue deepened with every report that ended the same way. By the end of the first week, no personal belongings, no tracks, and no verified clues had been recovered. Police ruled out early suggestions of an accident near machinery or a nearby water source. Everything remained open, but unproven. Despite exhaustive sweeps of over 470 square kilometers, the result was a blank map, hundreds of data points, none leading anywhere. Investigators refined their methods, re-interviewed witnesses, and rechecked logs from the first 24 hours. Still, the official statement remained unchanged. No confirmed evidence had been found. For the searchers on the ground, the reality was as harsh as the landscape. Every effort, every lead, dissolved into the same empty dust. When every clue fades to nothing, the question changes. From where someone went, to how an entire trace could vanish at all. By the 10th day of the search for 4-year-old Gus Lamont, the energy that had once filled Oak Park Station began to quiet. More than 470 square kilometers had been searched by police, emergency services, defense personnel, and volunteers. Helicopters had scanned the property from dawn to dusk. Drones had mapped every ridge and creek bed. Yet not a single verified trace of the boy had been found. On 3 October 2025, South Australia Police, SAPOL, made a difficult announcement. The large-scale ground search would be scaled back. The decision, confirmed in public statements and reported by ABC News and The Guardian, was based on expert medical and survival advice. Specialists had advised that the likelihood of a 4-year-old surviving for more than a week in such terrain, without water, shelter, or food, was now extremely low. The search's first phase had exhausted every realistic avenue of physical recovery. Police leadership acknowledged the need to preserve resources while maintaining investigative momentum. In practice, that meant fewer ground teams but more analytical work, re-examining early reports, verifying witness statements, and reviewing GPS data from previous sweeps. Command of the case was officially transferred to SAPOL's Missing Persons Investigation Section and the Major Crime Investigation Branch. Together, they began treating the disappearance not simply as a search operation, but as an ongoing investigation into cause and circumstance. Officers began collecting all field logs, air footage, and communications to build a timeline accurate to the minute. At the same time, the Australian Defence Force, ADF, contingent withdrew, having completed its assigned grid searches and infrared surveys. The State Emergency Service, SES, scaled down its presence, leaving only small, specialized units for targeted rechecks. The station returned to partial silence. No longer crowded with vehicles, radios, or search dogs. Police reassured the public that the case was not being closed. In press briefings reported by news.com.au and Adelaide Now, they emphasized that every possibility remains under active consideration. However, they confirmed that no evidence of foul play had been found. The investigation's focus, they said, was now on collating data and maintaining family liaison rather than expanding the physical search perimeter. For those who had spent days walking the same dust-covered tracks, the change in tempo was profound. What had been a coordinated physical mission now shifted to a forensic and procedural one. Maps once marked with search grids became exhibits. The outback's silence returned, indifferent to the urgency that had filled it for nearly 2 weeks. The decision was measured and procedural, but its emotional weight was unmistakable. The scale down marked not an end, but a transformation, from hope of discovery to the pursuit of explanation. When the boots stop moving and the engines fall silent, the search doesn't end. It simply changes form, from the ground to the record. In the days following the scale down, the search site at Oak Park Station grew still. The noise of engines, helicopters, and radios faded. What remained was the wide, unbroken silence of the South Australian outback. For the Lamont family, that silence meant uncertainty. For the public, it became a void that begged to be filled. Between October 4th and October 12th, 2025, official updates were sparse. South Australia Police, SAPOL, maintained that the investigation continued under the missing persons and major crime branches, but details were limited. Media outlets that had once published daily briefings now reported only short updates, that officers were reviewing data, rechecking grid logs, and liaising with the family. The absence of visible progress led to growing public tension. Online, speculation began to spread. Social media users proposed theories, examined satellite images, and circulated unverified photographs. Some claimed new evidence had been found. Others accused authorities of withholding information. Within days, misinformation began to multiply. According to AFP Fact Check, several widely shared images, including alleged aerial photos of new discoveries, were AI-generated fabrications. Police urged the public to rely solely on official sources and to avoid contributing to rumors that could hinder the investigation. The gap between official silence and public curiosity became a defining feature of the case. Major outlets such as The Guardian and ABC News noted that SAPOL's deliberate restraint was standard protocol. When searches move into an investigative phase, updates are limited to protect accuracy. But that necessity created a sense of distance between investigators and the community desperate for answers. During this period, community anxiety grew in Yunta and the surrounding towns. Locals organized prayer gatherings and informal vigils. In interviews with Adelaide Now, residents spoke of the unease that settled across the region, a collective awareness that a child was missing somewhere within the open land they all knew so well. Meanwhile, inside police headquarters in Adelaide, planning for a renewed and expanded search effort was underway. Teams reviewed satellite mapping data and meteorological patterns to identify potential zones outside the original 470 square kilometer search area. The new phase would deploy specialized personnel, vehicles, and aerial technology capable of covering even harsher ground. But none of that was yet visible to the public. For nearly 10 days, the only official statements repeated the same assurance. The case remains active. All possibilities are being investigated. The stillness that followed the initial search wasn't inactivity. It was recalibration. Investigators were shifting focus from the ground to the data, from open terrain to hidden patterns. Yet for those outside the operation, the quiet felt like abandonment. It was during this silence that the story of Gus Lamont began to change shape, from a missing person alert to a national mystery. In the space between updates, truth and rumor began to compete for the same ground, and only one would survive the next phase of the search. After 10 days of silence, South Australia Police announced a renewed phase in the search for 4-year-old Gus Lamont. The operation that had once been scaled down was about to expand again, this time with new leadership, new resources, and an understanding that the terrain itself was their greatest adversary. On October 13, 2025, SAPOL launched Taskforce Horizon, a dedicated multi-agency team combining specialists from the Missing Persons Investigation Section, Major Crime, State Emergency Service, SES, and the Australian Defence Force, ADF. Their mission was twofold: re-examine data from the initial 470 square kilometres already searched and extend the perimeter into new, previously unsearched zones beyond the original grid. The decision followed detailed reviews of satellite imagery, GPS logs, and meteorological data gathered from the first phase. Police identified areas of difficult terrain, rocky outcrops, dry creek beds, and heavy scrub, where initial ground teams had been unable to penetrate due to vehicle limitations or safety conditions. These became the focus of the new campaign. 82 ADF personnel, 18 police officers, and 33 vehicles were redeployed to the Yunta region, as reported by news.com.au and The Guardian. Their arrival transformed Oak Park Station once more into an operational base. Utility terrain vehicles, UTVs, drones with infrared cameras, and high-resolution aerial imaging systems were mobilized to sweep the outer zones. Each operation began before sunrise and was forced to pause by midday as temperatures soared into the high 30s. The environmental obstacles defined the search as much as the absence of evidence. Windstorms swept across the flats, erasing footprints and stirring red dust that clung to skin and machinery. Heat shimmer distorted visibility even from the air, making it difficult to distinguish terrain features, office says. Whereas described conditions as draining and disorienting, though the phrase appeared only in passing within official updates. According to SAPOL's public statements, each day's operations concluded with detailed debriefings and mapping reviews. Despite advanced tools and methodical coverage, the result remained the same. No confirmed evidence of Gus Lamont was located. The absence of any discovery, no clothing, no objects, no trace, reinforced how hostile and concealing the landscape could be. By October 16th, after 4 consecutive days of renewed searching, police temporarily halted operations due to extreme heat. A media statement confirmed that all personnel were being withdrawn until conditions improved. The statement reiterated that the investigation was ongoing and that no evidence of foul play had been found. The renewed phase had achieved what it set out to do, verify and expand, but it had not solved the mystery. Even with state-level coordination and military support, the desert had yielded nothing. Taskforce Horizon remained active, shifting from physical search to intelligence analysis. The ground effort might have paused, but the case file only grew thicker. In a land vast enough to hide a child and an army searching for him, the silence of the outback became the loudest thing of all. As Taskforce Horizon continued its work on the ground, another search had begun online, one less coordinated, but far louder. The disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont had become a national story, and in the absence of new information, public attention shifted to digital spaces. Within days of the initial search being scaled back, social media platforms filled with commentary, speculation, and what appeared to be new evidence. Images claiming to show recent sightings, abandoned clothing, or police discoveries spread rapidly across Facebook, TikTok, and X. Some appeared convincing. Aerial photographs with coordinates, others labeled as leaked drone captures. But as later confirmed by AFP Fact Check and news.com.au, many of these were AI-generated composites. None originated from South Australia Police or any legitimate source. The false images often carried subtle errors, distorted shadows, duplicated objects, or terrain inconsistent with the Yunta region. Yet in the compressed speed of online sharing, those details went unnoticed. Misinformation drew more engagement than the official updates that followed it. South Australia Police, SAPOL, issued multiple public advisories urging people to rely solely on verified releases through their media channels. Spokespersons reminded the public that no new physical evidence had been found, and that unverified claims could hinder the investigation. In statements reported by The Guardian and ABC News, SAPOL described the online speculation as deeply unhelpful to both search efforts and the Lamont family. Among the most circulated pieces of misinformation was an image that appeared to show a child's figure outlined in sand near an outback property. The image was shared thousands of times before being formally debunked. AFP Fact Check traced its origin to an AI image generation platform, confirming that the photo's data contained no camera information and that its composition was synthetically produced. For investigators, every false post had a cost. Resources were redirected to assess whether new claims might contain usable data. Each time one was disproven, hours had already been spent verifying what never existed. Meanwhile, inside Yunta and surrounding towns, locals grew uneasy with how the story had evolved. According to reports in Adelaide Now, residents expressed frustration that digital noise was drowning out the reality of the investigation. The family's privacy became a growing concern as speculative narratives attempted to assign blame or motive, none supported by evidence. The contrast between verified fact and viral fiction became one of the defining features of the case. While ground teams faced heat and distance, investigators online were contending with distortion and misinformation, a new kind of terrain to navigate. By mid-October, SAPOL's official communications were brief, deliberate, and strictly factual. Their language remained consistent: no evidence of foul play, no new discoveries, investigation ongoing. The louder the internet became, the quieter the facts seemed to sound. In the search for truth, the greatest obstacle wasn't the desert, it was the echo chamber that formed when silence met speculation. By mid-October 2025, more than 2 weeks had passed since 4-year-old Gus Lamont was last seen playing outside his family's homestead on Oak Park Station. The search that began as a full-scale emergency had evolved into a long, methodical investigation, one that, even now, remains open. According to the most recent statements from South Australia Police, SAPOL, the official position is clear. There is no evidence of foul play. Every theory, from accidental disappearance to deliberate harm, has been examined, but nothing concrete has emerged. As of the latest briefings reported by ABC News, The Guardian, and Adelaide Now, the case continues under the joint oversight of SAPOL's Missing Persons Investigation Section and Major Crime Investigation Branch. The operation known as Taskforce Horizon remains active. Investigators are reviewing aerial imagery, call records, and field logs gathered over the initial 17 days. Each data point, GPS coordinates, flight paths, vehicle tracks, is being cross-referenced in the hope that some small inconsistency might reveal a new lead. Police have confirmed that search areas could be revisited if new information arises, but for now, there are no planned large-scale ground operations. South Australia's harsh interior has presented one of the most challenging search environments in recent memory. Reporters who visited the site describe a landscape of endless sameness, low scrub, dry creeks, and soil that reveals nothing. For searchers and family alike, that emptiness has come to symbolize both the scope of their efforts and the silence that followed them. SAPOL continues to appeal for credible information from the public. The official message, echoed across national outlets, urges anyone with verifiable details, even small, seemingly insignificant observations, to contact Crime Stoppers or local police directly, investigados. Ours emphasize that credible reports are far more valuable than online speculation, which has already consumed time and resources without result. For the Lamont family, there have been no public statements beyond those facilitated through police channels. Out of respect for their privacy, SAPOL has limited commentary on the family's circumstances, confirming only that they have cooperated fully since the first night. In Yunta and the surrounding communities, reminders of the search still remain. Faded police tape, tire tracks in the sand, and makeshift signs from volunteers marking search grids. Each has become a quiet monument to persistence in the face of uncertainty. Weeks have passed, but the absence feels undiminished. The facts remain simple. A child vanished in daylight from a familiar yard, and no physical trace has been found. Everything else, every effort, every theory, continues to orbit that single, unresolved truth. The investigation remains open. The desert remains silent. Some mysteries end with answers, others linger in the landscape, waiting for time to speak where evidence could not.